Welcome, dear listener, to a cozy Christmas tale that will warm your heart and ease you into peaceful dreams. Tonight's story takes us to the snow-covered mountains of Evergreen Falls, where efficiency meets magic, where corporate plans collide with community spirit, and where two very different people discover that the best Christmas gift of all might just be finding where you truly belong. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the gentle snowfall of our story carry you away to a world where Christmas miracles happen not through magic alone, but through the power of human connection and the courage to follow your heart. Our story begins on a crisp December morning, where success is measured in spreadsheets, and a woman named Scarlett Monroe is about to discover that some things in life simply cannot be optimized. The 27th floor of Meridian Corporate Tower hummed with the efficient energy of a well-oiled machine. Scarlett Monroe stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of Conference Room C, her platinum blonde hair pulled into a perfect chignon, not a strand out of place despite having worked since 6 that morning. Her charcoal gray suit was immaculate, her tablet gleaming in her manicured hands as she gestured toward the massive digital display showing her latest optimization flowchart. "As you can see," Scarlett said, her voice crisp and confident, "implementing these efficiency protocols across Henderson Manufacturing's distribution network will eliminate 17 redundant processes, reduce delivery times by 32%, and save approximately $2.4 million annually." She tapped her tablet, and the chart transformed into a series of impressive graphs. ROI projections show complete cost recovery within 8 months. Richard Caldwell, Senior Vice President of Operations, leaned back in his leather chair with a satisfied smile. "Outstanding work, Scarlett. Henderson's board was thrilled with your preliminary report. You've turned another dying company into a profit powerhouse." Scarlett allowed herself a small, professional smile. Efficiency is simply a matter of identifying waste and eliminating unnecessary sentiment from business operations. Numbers don't lie, and neither do properly implemented systems. Which brings me to your next assignment. Richard slid a thin manila folder across the polished conference table. "This one's unique." Scarlett frowned slightly as she opened the folder. Inside were just 3 documents: a basic business registration for North Pole Logistics, a handwritten address in something called Evergreen Falls, and a single paragraph of client notes that made her eyebrows rise incrementally with each line. A delivery company that still uses paper records, no digital tracking system, no automated routing. She looked up from the sparse documentation. "Richard, there's barely any data here. How am I supposed to conduct a proper efficiency audit with—" She glanced at the papers again. "Is this address even real?" "Evergreen Falls sounds like something from a Christmas card." "It's real, and it's your assignment." Richard's expression grew more serious. North Pole Logistics has been in business for 30 years, serving a cluster of small mountain towns. Their owner, one Leo Andersen, has been resistant to modernization efforts, and the company is hemorrhaging money. Our client, let's call them an interested party, wants to know if the business is salvageable or if they should proceed with alternative arrangements. Scarlett set the folder down with the precision of someone who liked her world orderly and quantifiable. "Alternative arrangements? That's not your concern. Your job is to assess operational efficiency, recommend improvements, and determine viability. Standard protocol." Richard paused. "Though I should warn you, this won't be like your usual corporate consultations. The owner is apparently eccentric, and the location is quite remote. You'll need to stay in town for at least 2 weeks to get a complete picture." "Remote doesn't concern me. Eccentric business owners are often the ones most in need of systematic improvement." Scarlett gathered the documents with military precision. "When do I leave?" "Tomorrow. December 10th, which gives you exactly 2 weeks before Christmas to complete the assessment." "Christmas." Scarlett's voice carried the same tone one might use to say root canal. "Of course it's Christmas." Richard chuckled. "Problem with the holidays, Scarlett? Christmas is the antithesis of efficiency. Emotional decision-making, unnecessary expenditures, disrupted schedules, decreased productivity. She tucked the folder into her leather briefcase with a decisive snap. But I suppose someone has to bring order to the chaos. I'll have my preliminary report ready by December 20th. 24 hours later, Scarlett found herself questioning every life choice that had led to this moment. Her rental car, a sensible sedan that was wholly inadequate for the snow-covered mountain roads, chugged up what could generously be called a highway toward Evergreen Falls. The GPS had lost signal 20 miles ago, leaving her with handwritten directions from the rental car agency and a growing certainty that she'd taken a wrong turn somewhere near civilization. The December afternoon was crisp and bright, with fresh snow blanketing the pine trees that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Despite her annoyance at the navigational challenges, Scarlett had to admit the scenery was postcard perfect. Not that she had time for scenery appreciation, she had a business to save. When she finally crested a hill and saw Evergreen Falls spread out in the valley below, she had to resist the urge to pull over and check her directions again. The town looked like something from a snow globe. Tiny Victorian houses with wraparound porches, shops with candy cane-striped awnings, and more Christmas lights than seemed structurally advisable. A church steeple rose from the center of town, and she could see people moving along the sidewalks like colorful dots against the white snow. Quaint, she murmured, though the word carried about as much warmth as her breath in the cold air. Quaint was usually code for financially unviable. Main Street was exactly what she'd expected. Narrow, lined with small businesses that probably hadn't updated their inventory systems since the 1990s, and crowded with people who walked slowly and stopped to chat with every person they passed. Scarlett's efficiency-oriented mind immediately cataloged at least a dozen ways the town's layout could be optimized for better traffic flow. She found North Pole Logistics wedged between a shop called Mistletoe and Magic, and something that appeared to be a combination bakery bookstore. The building itself was a converted Victorian house painted cheerful red with white trim, and an old-fashioned sleigh, an actual sleigh, sat in the front yard, surrounded by what appeared to be reindeer decorations. A hand-painted sign hung above the front porch, North Pole Logistics, delivering Christmas magic since 1993. Scarlett sat in her car for a moment, staring at the building and trying to reconcile what she was seeing with anything resembling a professional business operation. The front yard was filled with wooden boxes, canvas bags, and what looked like several people in heavy coats sorting packages by hand. No forklifts, no conveyor belts, no scanning equipment that she could see. Okay, she said to herself, checking her reflection in the rearview mirror and straightening her wool coat. Just remember, every business can be saved with the right systems. Even this one. She grabbed her briefcase and tablet, locked the car, and walked up the snow-covered path to the front door. The sound of Christmas music drifted from inside, along with laughter and the occasional sound of something heavy being dropped. She knocked briskly, waited exactly 10 seconds, then tried the door handle. The door opened to controlled chaos. The entire first floor of the house had been converted into a shipping operation, but it looked nothing like any warehouse Scarlett had ever seen. Packages were sorted into wooden cubbies that lined every wall, each cubby labeled with handwritten cards. Several people were wrapping packages at a long wooden table, their conversation punctuated by frequent laughter. Christmas garland was draped everywhere, and a massive evergreen tree stood in one corner, decorated with what appeared to be shipping tags instead of traditional ornaments. "Excuse me?" Scarlett called out, raising her voice above the music and chatter. "I'm looking for Leo Andersen?" A woman with silver hair and rosy cheeks looked up from where she was tying ribbons on a stack of packages. "Oh, honey, you must be the efficiency expert. Leo's out back with the sleigh." "Martha," she called to another woman, "run tell Leo his consultant is here." "Actually, I'm a corporate optimization specialist," Scarlett corrected, but the woman was already back to her ribbons. "And I can find him myself." "Which way to the back?" "Through the kitchen, dear. Mind the cookies cooling on the counter." Scarlett navigated through what had once been a residential kitchen, but now served as a combination break room and gift wrapping station. The counters were covered with cooling racks of cookies, thermoses of what smelled like hot chocolate, and more packages waiting to be processed. She pushed through the back door and stepped into a scene that made her question whether she'd somehow driven into an elaborate Christmas theme park. The backyard had been converted into what could only be described as Santa's workshop, if Santa had been operating on a shoestring budget. A large wooden barn housed more sorting areas, and she could see people loading packages into various vehicles, including, impossibly, an honest-to-goodness sleigh pulled by what appeared to be actual reindeer. "Are you kidding me?" she muttered under her breath. "Probably not the most professional thing you've ever seen." Scarlett spun around to find herself face to face with a man who seemed to have stepped out of a Christmas catalog. He was tall, with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it, wearing a thick red flannel shirt over jeans that had seen better days. His brown eyes held a hint of amusement that suggested he'd been watching her reaction for several moments. "Leo Andersen, I assume?" She extended her hand in a crisp handshake. "Scarlett Monroe, Meridian Corporate Solutions. I'm here to conduct your operational efficiency audit." His handshake was warm and calloused, lasting just a moment longer than strictly professional. "Welcome to North Pole Logistics, Miss Monroe. I have to say, you're not quite what I was expecting. Neither is this." She gestured toward the sleigh, where a bearded man in overalls was securing packages with what appeared to be hand-tied rope. "Mr. Andersen, I reviewed your file, but I think there may have been some miscommunication. I was told this was a delivery company, not a Christmas entertainment business." Leo's grin widened. "Oh, we're definitely a delivery company. Been serving these mountain communities for 30 years. We just do things a little differently than most logistics operations. Differently." Scarlett's voice was carefully neutral, by using sleighs and reindeer. Reindeer are surprisingly efficient in mountain terrain, much better than trucks when the snow gets deep, and they never break down. He started walking toward the barn, clearly expecting her to follow. Plus, the kids love them. That's half the magic right there. Scarlett hurried to keep up, her heels not ideal for the packed snow. "Mr. Andersen, magic isn't a business model. Efficiency metrics, cost-benefit analysis, optimization protocols, those are business models. Call me Leo, and I think you might be surprised what magic can accomplish when it comes to business." He stopped at the barn entrance and turned to face her. "But I suppose that's why you're here, to tell me I'm doing everything wrong." There was no bitterness in his voice, just a hint of resignation that made Scarlett feel unexpectedly defensive. "I'm here to help your company succeed. Sometimes that requires changes, but the goal is always sustainability and growth." "Well then, Miss Monroe, let me show you how North Pole Logistics actually works. Fair warning, it might not fit into any of your usual categories." For the next hour, Leo guided Scarlett through the most unconventional business operation she'd ever encountered. There were no computers, no digital tracking systems, no automated anything. Instead, every package was logged by hand in enormous leather-bound ledgers, with notes about the recipient that read more like personal letters than shipping information. "Mrs. Henderson in Pine Ridge gets nervous about packages left outside," Leo explained, showing her one entry. "So we always knock until someone answers. Tommy Carson in Maple Falls is saving up for a new bicycle, so if anyone sends him money for Christmas, we make sure to deliver it with a little extra encouragement." "You read people's mail?" Scarlett's professional horror was evident. "We don't read sealed letters. But when someone ships a gift with specific delivery instructions or asks us to coordinate with other packages, well, we're not just delivering boxes, we're delivering Christmas." Scarlett pulled out her tablet and began making notes at a furious pace. This level of personalization might seem charming, but it's completely unsustainable from an efficiency standpoint. How do you track delivery times? What's your success rate? How do you handle volume fluctuations? Leo leaned against a wooden sorting table, watching her tap notes into her device with impressive speed. "We've successfully delivered every package for 30 years. Our delivery time is when people need it most, and volume fluctuations sort themselves out because everyone in town helps during busy periods. Everyone in town works for you? Everyone in town is family, or feels like it." He gestured toward the main work area, where Scarlett could see at least a dozen people of various ages sorting, wrapping, and organizing packages. Most of them volunteer during Christmas season. Some year-round. Scarlett looked up from her tablet. Volunteer? You mean unpaid labor? I mean people who care about their community and want to help their neighbors receive a little Christmas magic. Leo's voice had lost some of its easy warmth. We're not running a Fortune 500 company here, Miss Monroe. We're running a family business that happens to keep 12 mountain towns connected during the most important time of year. Christmas magic doesn't pay operating expenses, Mr. Andersen. How exactly does this business stay solvent? Leo was quiet for a moment, and Scarlett realized she'd hit a nerve. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. We charge what people can afford to pay. Sometimes that's our standard rate. Sometimes it's more. Sometimes it's less. Sometimes it's a batch of Martha's cookies or help fixing the barn roof. You operate on a barter system? Scarlett's fingers flew over her tablet screen. Do you have any idea how impossible that makes tax compliance? How do you track income? How do you budget for expenses? The same way mountain communities have survived for generations. We take care of each other. Leo straightened up, his casual demeanor shifting toward something more guarded. Look, Miss Monroe, I appreciate that your company sent someone to help, but I'm not sure we're going to see eye to eye on what success looks like. Scarlett snapped her tablet closed with more force than necessary. Success looks like staying in business, Mr. Andersen. It looks like sustainable profit margins and efficient operations and not going bankrupt because you're too sentimental to charge people properly for your services. Sentimental. Leo repeated the word like it tasted bitter. Is that what you call caring about people? I call it poor business practices. Scarlett's professional composure cracked slightly. Do you want to save this company or not? The question hung in the cold air between them, and Scarlett immediately regretted her tone. She prided herself on maintaining professional distance, but something about Leo's combination of passion and impracticality was getting under her skin in a way she couldn't quite explain. Leo studied her for a long moment, his brown eyes unreadable. You know what, Miss Monroe? I think maybe you should see what we're really delivering before you decide whether it's worth saving. What do you mean? I mean, come with me on tomorrow's delivery route. See for yourself what this poor business practice actually accomplishes. He pulled a worn baseball cap from his back pocket and settled it on his head. Unless you're too worried about getting your efficiency metrics dirty, it was clearly a challenge, and Scarlett had never backed down from a challenge in her life. Fine. What time? 6 a.m. Sharp. Leo's grin returned, but there was something different about it now, something that made Scarlett wonder if she'd just agreed to more than a simple delivery route. Hope you brought warm clothes, Miss Monroe. December mornings in the mountains can be pretty unforgiving. As Scarlett walked back through the workshop toward her car, she could hear Leo calling instructions about tomorrow's deliveries, his voice carrying easily over the cheerful chaos. Several people called out goodbyes to her, their voices warm and welcoming, despite her obvious status as an outsider. She settled into her rental car and sat for a moment, watching the activity through the barn's open doors. Leo appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the warm light inside, and raised his hand in a casual wave. Despite herself, Scarlett found herself waving back before starting the engine. The drive to her hotel, a charming bed and breakfast that was probably wildly inefficient but undeniably cozy, gave her time to process what she'd seen. North Pole Logistics defied every principle of modern business operations, from their paper-based record-keeping, to their barter payment system, to their apparent reliance on community goodwill rather than professional logistics. And yet, as she pulled into the inn's snow-covered parking lot, Scarlett found herself thinking about the genuine warmth in the voices of the volunteers, the careful attention to detail in those handwritten package notes, and the way Leo's entire demeanor had changed when he talked about delivering Christmas. Sentiment, she murmured to herself as she gathered her briefcase and overnight bag. Pure sentiment. But as she walked up the inn's front steps, past windows glowing with warm light and the sound of laughter drifting from inside, Scarlett couldn't quite shake the feeling that she might be missing something important about North Pole Logistics, something that didn't fit neatly into her usual efficiency spreadsheets. Scarlett's phone alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., though she'd been awake for the past hour listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a small mountain town waking up. Through her in-room's frost-covered window, she could see snow falling in fat, lazy flakes that would have been picturesque if she weren't worried about driving conditions. She'd chosen her outfit carefully the night before: thermal leggings under wool slacks, a cashmere sweater over a silk blouse, and her most practical winter coat. She'd even packed snow boots, though she drew the line at anything that might compromise her professional appearance. After all, this was still a business consultation, regardless of the unconventional delivery method. The Evergreen Inn's dining room was a testament to small-town charm, with mismatched antique furniture and the smell of fresh cinnamon rolls that made Scarlett's stomach growl, despite her usual breakfast of protein bars and coffee. The innkeeper, a cheerful woman named Dorothy, who seemed to know everyone's life story, insisted on packing her an extra thermos of coffee for the road. "You're riding with Leo today, aren't you, dear?" Dorothy asked, wrapping the thermos in a cheerful red scarf. Such a good man. The whole town would be lost without North Pole logistics, especially this time of year. "How long has the company been serving this area?" Scarlett asked, her consultant instincts automatically gathering information. "Oh, Leo took over from his father about 15 years ago. Before that, it was his grandfather who started the business. 3 generations of Andersens making sure Christmas gets delivered to every doorstep in these mountains." Dorothy's eyes twinkled, though I suspect Leo's got a bit more magic in him than the others did. "Magic again," Scarlett muttered under her breath. "Don't be too skeptical, honey. You might be surprised what you see today." Scarlett arrived at North Pole Logistics at exactly 5:58 a.m., pleased to discover that Leo was already loading packages into what appeared to be a modified pickup truck with an enclosed cargo area painted to look like an oversized gift box. The sleigh, thankfully, was nowhere in sight. "Good morning, Miss Monroe," Leo called out, his breath creating puffs of vapor in the cold air. He looked frustratingly alert for someone who'd probably been working since before dawn. "Ready for the grand tour?" "I'm ready to observe your operational procedures," Scarlett replied, climbing into the passenger seat and immediately appreciating that the truck's heater was running full blast. "How many stops are we making today?" "Depends on what we find along the way," Leo said, settling behind the wheel with a travel mug that smelled like hot chocolate. "That's not very specific. Specificity is overrated when you're delivering Christmas." He glanced at her tablet, which was already open to a new efficiency assessment document. "Do you mind if I ask you something, Miss Monroe?" "Scarlett." "And ask away. What made you want to become an efficiency expert? It seems like it would be a pretty lonely job, finding fault with the way people do things." Scarlett looked up from her tablet, surprised by the question. Most clients either resented her presence or treated her like a necessary evil. They rarely asked about her motivations. "I don't find fault. I find solutions. There's a difference." "Is there?" Leo pulled out of the parking area and headed down Main Street, waving at several early-rising shop owners who were shoveling snow from their sidewalks. "Because from where I sit, it seems like you spent yesterday cataloging everything we're doing wrong. I was identifying areas for improvement. Every business has them." Scarlett glanced at Leo's profile as he navigated the snowy streets. "And to answer your question, I became an efficiency consultant because I believe in the power of systems. When things work the way they're supposed to work, people are happier, more productive, and more successful. Even if those systems eliminate the human element, especially then, human elements are unpredictable. They lead to inconsistency, emotional decision-making, and inefficiency." Leo was quiet for a moment as they drove through the outskirts of town, past small houses with Christmas lights twinkling in the early morning darkness. "That's an interesting perspective. Can I share something with you?" "Of course." The human element is exactly why North Pole Logistics exists. Their first stop was a small cabin set back from the road, its windows glowing with warm light, despite the early hour. Leo pulled a single package from the back of the truck, a small box wrapped in brown paper with a red ribbon, and gestured for Scarlett to follow him up the snow-covered path. This is for Emma Castellanos, he explained as they walked. She's 83, lives alone since her husband passed last year. Her granddaughter in California sends her care packages once a month. Standard delivery, Scarlett observed. Nothing particularly complex about that. Leo knocked on the door with a specific pattern. 3 quick knocks, pause, 2 more. After a moment, the door opened to reveal a tiny woman in a flowered housecoat, her face lighting up when she saw Leo. Leo, right on time, as always. Emma's voice carried a slight accent. And you brought a friend. Emma, this is Scarlett. She's learning about our business. Leo handed over the package with a small bow. From Maria in San Diego. Bless that girl. Come in, come in. I just made fresh empanadas. We can't stay long, Emma. Full route today. But save me one for Friday? Always do. Emma turned to Scarlett with sharp, intelligent eyes. You make sure you take care of our Leo, young lady. He's the heart of this community. As they walked back to the truck, Scarlett checked her watch. Total stop time, 8 minutes. For a delivery that could have been completed in 30 seconds. Could have been. But then Emma would have spent another week without talking to another human being. Leo started the engine and began backing out of the driveway. Her granddaughter specifically pays extra for what she calls wellness checks. We make sure Emma's okay, that she has what she needs, that someone knows she's alive and well. That's social work, not logistics. Sometimes they're the same thing. Their second stop was a modern house on the edge of Evergreen Falls, where Leo delivered a stack of packages to a harried-looking woman juggling a toddler and a cup of coffee. Sarah, this is Scarlett, Leo said, handing over the packages. She's studying our delivery methods. Sarah laughed. Good luck making sense of it. I still don't understand how Leo always knows exactly when I'll be awake and coherent enough to answer the door. Trade secret, Leo said with a wink. How's the job hunt going? Better. I have an interview next week in Pine Ridge. Thank you for putting in that word with your friend at the insurance office. Just mentioned you were looking. The rest was all you. As they drove toward their next stop, Scarlett made more notes on her tablet. You're providing job placement services now? I'm helping a neighbor. Sarah's been struggling since her divorce, trying to raise 2 kids on her own. When I heard Ben Kirkpatrick was looking for someone with bookkeeping experience. Leo shrugged. It just made sense to connect them. Do you provide personal services for all your customers? I pay attention to people. It's not that complicated. But Scarlett was beginning to realize it was more complicated than Leo made it sound. Over the next 4 hours, they visited 12 more stops, and each one revealed another layer of North Pole Logistics' unconventional approach to business. At the Riverside nursing home, Leo didn't just deliver packages. He spent 20 minutes helping residents open gifts and reading cards to those with vision problems. At the Mountain View Elementary School, he coordinated with the principal to ensure that several packages marked for the teacher's discretionary fund were distributed to families who might need help with Christmas expenses. At a small farm outside town, he helped an elderly man repair a fence that had been damaged by the previous night's snow. This is highly inefficient, Scarlett observed as they drove away from the farm. You're providing free labor, extended social services, and what amounts to community coordination. None of that appears on your fee schedule. Nope, Leo agreed cheerfully. Awful business model, isn't it? It's unsustainable. How do you calculate ROI on fence repair? How do you track billable hours when you're reading greeting cards to nursing home residents? Leo pulled the truck over at a scenic overlook and turned to face her. Can I ask you something? In all your efficiency consulting, do you ever measure things like customer satisfaction, community impact, the difference your clients make in people's lives? Customer satisfaction is important, yes, but it has to be balanced against operational costs and profit margins. What if the profit isn't monetary? Scarlett stared at him. Profit, by definition, is monetary. That's what profit means. Is it? Leo gestured toward the valley below them, where Evergreen Falls looked like a miniature Christmas village surrounded by snow-covered mountains. What about the profit of knowing that Mrs. Henderson doesn't have to worry about packages being stolen, because we always wait for her to answer the door? What about the profit of seeing kids' faces light up when they see our delivery truck coming up their street? What about the profit of being part of something that makes people's lives a little bit better? Those are nice sentiments, but they don't pay operational expenses. Don't they? Leo pulled out a worn notebook from his jacket pocket and flipped through several pages. Last month, when our truck broke down, Marcus at the auto shop fixed it for free because we'd helped his daughter get Christmas presents delivered to her kids after her ex-husband stopped paying child support. When our roof needed repair this fall, half the town showed up with tools and materials. When Martha had her heart attack in October, the whole community rallied to keep the business running. While I stayed with her at the hospital, Scarlett was quiet for a moment, processing what he was saying. You're describing a reciprocal economy, mutual aid rather than traditional commerce. I'm describing people taking care of each other, the way communities are supposed to work. Leo closed the notebook and tucked it back into his pocket. The money works out because people value what we do. They pay what they can, when they can, and they help out when we need it. It's not efficient by your standards, but it's sustainable by ours. What happens when someone can't pay? When someone can't help? When the community support isn't enough? Leo's expression grew more serious. Then we figure it out, the same way families figure things out when times get tough. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the snow fall over the valley. Despite her professional skepticism, Scarlett found herself thinking about the faces she'd seen that morning. Emma's genuine joy at seeing Leo, Sarah's relief at having someone care about her job search, the nursing home residents who had clearly been waiting for their weekly visit from the cheerful delivery man who took time to read their mail. "Can I ask you something now?" she said finally. "Sure. Why did you agree to let Meridian Corporate Solutions conduct this audit? If your business model is working for you and your community, why invite outside consultation?" Leo was quiet for so long that Scarlett wondered if she'd overstepped some boundary. When he finally spoke, his voice was more subdued than she'd heard it all morning. Because sustainable and profitable aren't the same thing. And because there are people who think North Pole logistics is standing in the way of progress. He started the engine and pulled back onto the road. "I love what we do, Scarlett. I love being part of this community, and I love knowing that we're making a difference in people's lives. But I'm not naive. I know we're not operating efficiently by modern standards. I know our profit margins are terrible, and our record keeping is outdated, and our delivery methods are probably laughable to anyone with actual logistics training. So you want to change? I want to survive. There's a difference." Leo glanced at her, then back at the road. "Someone's been buying up property around here, making offers to small businesses, trying to modernize what they call outdated service models. Word is they're planning to bring in a big automated delivery service to replace operations like ours." Scarlett felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "Do you know who?" "No. But I know that if North Pole Logistics can't prove we're viable as a business, we won't be able to compete with whatever they're planning." Leo's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "These communities depend on us, Scarlett, not just for package delivery, but for connection, for the knowledge that someone's paying attention. Someone cares if they're okay. Someone's making sure they're not forgotten during the most important time of year. And you think I can help with that? I think you're the first efficiency expert who's ever asked why we do what we do, instead of just telling us to stop doing it." Leo pulled into the parking lot of a small diner. "Lunch?" Inside the Mountain View diner, Scarlett discovered that Leo's reputation preceded him everywhere. The waitress hugged him like a son. The cook came out to discuss plans for the annual Christmas Eve community dinner, and at least 3 other diners stopped by their table to chat about holiday deliveries. "This is why your business model works," Scarlett observed, watching Leo coordinate what amounted to a small logistics operation over coffee and sandwiches. "You're not just delivering packages. You're the communication hub for the entire community. I never thought of it that way. You should. It's actually quite sophisticated from a systems perspective." Scarlett pulled out her tablet and began making notes. Informal information networks, distributed problem solving, resource sharing, community coordination. You're operating a complex social infrastructure disguised as a delivery service. Leo leaned back in his booth, studying her with newfound interest. "Is that good or bad from an efficiency standpoint?" "It's brilliant," Scarlett said. surprising herself with the enthusiasm in her voice. Completely unconventional, probably impossible to replicate or scale, but brilliant for this specific environment and community structure. So we're not a complete disaster? You're a complete disaster by traditional business metrics, Scarlett admitted. But you're also solving problems that traditional logistics companies don't even recognize exist. The question is whether we can find a way to preserve what makes you special, while implementing systems that will keep you financially viable. Leo was quiet for a moment, then smiled, the first genuinely relaxed smile she'd seen from him since yesterday. You know, Scarlett, you're not quite what I was expecting from an efficiency expert. What were you expecting? Someone who would take one look at our operation and recommend we buy a fleet of trucks, install GPS tracking, and eliminate everything that makes us different. That would be the conventional approach, Scarlett agreed. But then, you're not a conventional business. As they prepared to leave the diner, Leo turned to her with an expression that seemed both hopeful and cautious. Does this mean you think North Pole Logistics is worth saving? Scarlett looked around the diner, at the faces of people who had spent their lunch hour checking in with Leo about everything from package deliveries to community events to personal problems. She thought about Emma's joy at seeing a familiar face, Sarah's relief at knowing someone cared about her struggles, the nursing home residents who clearly considered Leo's visits the highlight of their week. I think what you've built here is remarkable, she said finally. The challenge is going to be figuring out how to protect it. As they walked back to the truck, Scarlett found herself wondering when, exactly, she'd stopped thinking about North Pole Logistics as a business problem to be solved and started thinking about it as a community treasure to be preserved. And she couldn't help but notice that Leo's smile had lingered long after they'd left the diner, warming her in a way that had nothing to do with the truck's efficient heating system. The next morning brought news that would test both Scarlett's efficiency principles and Leo's community-based approach to business. She arrived at North Pole Logistics to find the usually cheerful workspace buzzing with worried conversations. "What's wrong?" Scarlett asked Martha, who was wrapping packages with noticeably less enthusiasm than usual. "Oh, honey, it's the Riverside Bridge. The storm last night brought down that old pine tree across the road. Nobody can get through to Pine Ridge or Maple Falls until the county crew clears it." Martha shook her head. "Could be 2, maybe 3 days. And Christmas Eve is next week." Scarlett found Leo in the barn, staring at a map of the mountain roads with several other volunteers. His usual easy confidence had been replaced by the focused intensity of someone solving a complex problem. "How many packages are we talking about?" she asked, joining the group around the map. 47 deliveries that have to go through Riverside Bridge," said Tom, the bearded man she'd seen with the sleigh. "Plus, the nursing home gets their weekly delivery, and the school was expecting those books for their Christmas program. Can't people drive around, take an alternate route?" Leo looked up from the map. "Nearest alternate route adds about 60 miles each way, and half of it's unpaved mountain roads that'll be pretty treacherous after last night's snow, not safe for regular vehicles." Scarlett studied the map, her analytical mind automatically calculating logistics. What about coordinating with other delivery services? Surely someone has the equipment to handle mountain terrain. "The big companies don't deliver to individual houses up here," Tom explained. "Too remote, not cost-effective. That's why people depend on us." "So what's the plan?" Scarlett asked. Leo and Tom exchanged glances. "Well," Leo said slowly, "we could take the sleigh." Scarlett stared at him. The sleigh. The actual sleigh with the actual reindeer. "Dasher and Blitzen are pretty sure-footed in snow," Tom said with complete seriousness. "And the sleigh can carry a decent load. Won't be fast, but it'll get through terrain that would stop a truck." "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Leo said. "Though I realize it probably sounds insane to someone who specializes in efficient logistics." Scarlett looked at the map again, thinking through the problem from every angle she could imagine. "What's the weight capacity of the sleigh? How long would the route take? What's your contingency plan if weather conditions worsen?" "About 400 pounds for safe travel over rough terrain," Leo answered. 6 to 8 hours for the full route, depending on conditions. And if weather gets bad, we hole up wherever we are until it passes." That's a terrible efficiency ratio. Hours of travel time for 47 packages, weather-dependent transportation, no backup system. Scarlett trailed off as she realized everyone was staring at her. But it's the only option that actually gets the packages delivered, isn't it? Only option that doesn't leave 3 communities without their Christmas deliveries, Leo confirmed. Scarlett surprised herself by saying, "What time do we leave?" "We?" Leo's eyebrows rose. "Scarlett, you don't have to. If I'm going to understand how this business really operates, I need to see all aspects of your service delivery, even the unconventional ones." She glanced down at her wool coat and dress boots. "Though I'm going to need different clothes." An hour later, Scarlett found herself bundled in borrowed snow gear, sitting in an actual sleigh behind 2 very large, very real reindeer, questioning every decision that had led to this moment. The sleigh was more sophisticated than she'd expected, clearly handcrafted but with modern safety features and a weatherproof cargo area for packages. "You sure about this?" Leo asked, settling beside her with the reins in his hands. He'd traded his usual flannel for serious winter gear, and Scarlett tried not to notice how the cold air brought out the color in his cheeks. "Ask me again in 6 hours, she said, checking that her tablet was securely wrapped in the waterproof case Martha had insisted she borrow. The first part of the journey took them through terrain that Scarlett had to admit would have been impossible for any conventional vehicle. The sleigh moved smoothly over snow-packed trails that wound between towering pine trees, the only sounds the soft jingle of harness bells and the whisper of runners over snow. "It's beautiful," she said, forgetting for a moment to maintain professional distance from the experience. "Different perspective than you get from a delivery truck," Leo agreed. "My grandfather used to say that you couldn't really understand these mountains until you'd traveled through them the old way. How long has your family been in this business? 3 generations. Grandpa started it back when these communities were even more isolated than they are now. My father modernized some things, added the truck routes, expanded to more towns. I've been trying to figure out how to honor what they built while adapting to a changing world." Scarlett watched the landscape slide past, thinking about the business model implications. "You're essentially running 2 parallel operations: modern logistics for accessible areas, traditional methods for challenging terrain. Never thought of it as parallel operations. Just seemed like using the right tool for the job." Their first stop was a small cabin so remote that Scarlett couldn't see any other buildings from its front porch. An elderly man emerged before they'd even brought the sleigh to a complete stop. "Leo! And Martha said you'd have company today." The man smiled at Scarlett as Leo retrieved several packages from the cargo area. "Welcome to Miller's Ridge, young lady. Don't get many visitors up here, especially this time of year. Frank, this is Scarlett. She's learning about our business." "Best education you'll get," Frank said, accepting his packages with obvious pleasure. Leo's daddy used to make this run, and his grandpa before that. Some things don't need changing, no matter what the modern world thinks. As they prepared to leave, Frank pressed a thermos into Leo's hands. "Hot soup for the road. Martha's recipe. Tell her thanks for sending the ingredients with last week's delivery." Back in the sleigh, Scarlett made notes on her tablet while Leo navigated a particularly steep section of trail. "Frank lives completely off-grid, doesn't he? Solar power, well water, grows most of his own food. Been up there for 20 years. Leo glanced at her tablet. "Probably doesn't fit any of your standard customer demographics. He's fascinating from a service delivery standpoint. How do you handle logistics for customers with no road access, no internet, no phone service?" "Same way my grandfather did. We know where people are, we know what they need, and we make sure they get it." Leo paused. "Though I suppose that sounds hopelessly inefficient to you." Scarlett considered this as they crested a hill and she got her first view of Pine Ridge, a cluster of houses nestled in a valley that looked like something from a Christmas card. It's not inefficient if it's the only system that works. The question is whether it's scalable or replicable. Would you want to scale it? Replicate it? Scarlett realized she didn't have an immediate answer. "I don't know. Part of what makes it work is the personal knowledge, the community relationships. Those aren't easily transferable. Exactly. Which is why I worry about what happens if we get bought out by some big corporation. They spent the next several hours making deliveries throughout Pine Ridge, and Scarlett began to understand the depth of Leo's integration into the community. He knew not just names and addresses, but family situations, health concerns, financial struggles, and personal celebrations. When they delivered medicine to an elderly woman, Leo spent extra time making sure she understood the dosage instructions. When they brought packages to a family with young children, he had somehow coordinated with other customers to ensure the kids would have presents under their tree. "How do you keep track of all this information?" Scarlett asked as they headed toward their next stop. "You don't have customer profiles, databases, service histories." "I pay attention, and I care." Leo guided the sleigh around a fallen branch, though I suppose that's not a very systematic approach. It's incredibly systematic. It's just based on human memory and relationships instead of digital storage. Scarlett looked up from her notes. "You're essentially operating a distributed information network with yourself as the central processing unit." Leo laughed. "That might be the most technical way anyone's ever described gossiping with my neighbors." "It's not gossip. It's community intelligence. You're tracking needs, resources, connections, opportunities. It's actually quite sophisticated." Their last stop in Pine Ridge was the local elementary school, where they delivered boxes of books that had been donated by families in Evergreen Falls. The principal, a young woman named Jessica, helped them carry the boxes inside, while children pressed their faces against classroom windows to wave at the reindeer. "This is amazing, Leo. The kids have been talking about the book delivery all week." Jessica opened one of the boxes to reveal brand new children's books with Christmas themes. "How did you coordinate donations from 3 different towns?" "Scarlett figured out the logistics," Leo said, surprising her. "Turned out to be a pretty complex operation when you actually map it out." Scarlett realized he was referring to the notes she'd been making throughout the day, observations about community connections, resource sharing, and informal coordination networks. "I just documented what you were already doing," she said. "No. You helped me see patterns I hadn't noticed, like how Mrs. Peterson's book donations connect to the school's reading program, which connects to the library fundraiser, which connects to the literacy volunteer program in Maple Falls." Leo grinned at her. "Turns out our inefficient operation is actually pretty well integrated." As they loaded the empty sleigh for the journey home, Scarlett found herself looking at Leo with new appreciation. "You've built something remarkable here. It's not just a delivery service, it's community infrastructure. Think it can survive in the modern world?" "I think it needs to survive in the modern world," Scarlett said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "The question is how to protect it from people who don't understand its value." The journey back to Evergreen Falls was quieter, both of them lost in their own thoughts as the sleigh glided through the snow-covered forest. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that Scarlett had never seen from her corporate office windows. "Can I ask you something personal?" Leo said as they approached the outskirts of town. "Sure. What's your story? I mean, how does someone end up specializing in efficiency consulting?" Scarlett was quiet for a moment, watching the lights of Evergreen Falls come into view. "My father owned a small manufacturing business, family operation, employed about 30 people from our town. When I was 16, he got bought out by a corporation that promised to modernize everything, make it more efficient. What happened? They laid off half the workforce, automated most of the processes, and moved production to a cheaper facility 3 states away." Scarlett's voice was carefully neutral. "Very efficient from a cost perspective. And your father?" "Never recovered from watching his employees lose their jobs. He always felt like he'd betrayed the people who depended on him." Scarlett pulled her borrowed scarf tighter around her neck. "I decided that if I understood efficiency systems well enough, I could help small businesses adapt without losing what made them valuable to their communities." Leo was quiet for a long moment. "That's not what I was expecting you to say." "What were you expecting?" "Someone who cared more about profit margins than people." "Profit margins matter, but so do people." Scarlett looked at him. "The trick is figuring out how to balance both. As they pulled into the North Pole logistics yard, Scarlett realized that something fundamental had shifted during their day in the sleigh. She no longer saw Leo's operation as a quaint but doomed throwback to simpler times. Instead, she was beginning to understand it as a sophisticated response to real community needs, a business model that couldn't be replicated by corporate efficiency, but couldn't be replaced by it either. "So," Leo said as he helped her down from the sleigh, his hands warm even through her borrowed gloves, "what's the verdict? Are we completely hopeless from a business perspective?" Scarlett looked around the yard, where several volunteers were waiting to help unload the sleigh and hear about their day. The barn was warm with light and laughter, and she could smell hot chocolate and fresh cookies from inside. "You're completely hopeless by traditional metrics," she said, "and completely essential by every measure that actually matters." Leo's smile was brilliant in the fading light. "Does this mean you're starting to believe in Christmas magic?" Scarlett felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the cold mountain air. "I'm starting to believe in something," she admitted. And as Leo's hand lingered on hers for just a moment longer than necessary, Scarlett wondered if what she was beginning to believe in had less to do with Christmas magic and more to do with the man who'd spent the day showing her that efficiency and heart didn't have to be mutually exclusive. The crisis struck on December 18th, 6 days before Christmas Eve. Scarlett was in her in-room, reviewing the comprehensive business analysis she'd been preparing for Meridian Corporate Solutions, when her phone rang with Leo's number. "Scarlett, we've got a problem. A big one." Something in his voice made her immediately close her laptop. "What's wrong? Can you come to the warehouse? It's easier to show you than explain." 20 minutes later, Scarlett stood in the North Pole logistics barn, staring at what could only be described as a disaster. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, and at least half of the sorted packages had been moved to dry areas around the workspace. Martha and several volunteers were wrapping packages in plastic sheeting, while Tom and another man worked to position buckets under the worst leaks. "The roof," Leo explained, running a hand through his damp hair. "This morning's ice storm was apparently the last straw. We've got leaks throughout the building, and the weather service is predicting more freezing rain tonight." "How bad is the damage?" "Bad enough that we can't safely store packages in here until it's fixed. And with Christmas Eve delivery schedules." Leo gestured helplessly at the chaos around them. Scarlett's analytical mind immediately began processing the logistics nightmare. "How many packages are we talking about? What's your storage capacity in other locations? How quickly can repairs be completed?" "About 800 packages still to be processed and delivered," Martha called out from where she was resorting water-damaged boxes. "And the only other covered space we have is the front office, which might hold maybe 50 packages." "Repair estimates?" Scarlett asked Leo. "Can't get anyone out here until after Christmas. Everyone's booked solid with emergency calls from the ice storm." Scarlett walked through the workspace, calculating square footage and package volume with the efficiency that had made her reputation in corporate consulting. But this wasn't a theoretical optimization problem. It was a crisis that would directly impact hundreds of families counting on Christmas deliveries. "What about temporary solutions? Can you rent storage space? Partner with other businesses?" Leo shook his head. "No rental facilities within 100 miles. And most of the local businesses are dealing with their own storm damage." "The high school?" Martha said suddenly. "What about the gymnasium at the high school?" "That could work for storage," Tom agreed. "But we'd still need workspace for sorting and packaging, and we'd need permission from the school board." Scarlett pulled out her tablet and began making notes. "Okay, let's think about this systematically. We need dry storage space, a workspace for package processing, and a temporary distribution system." She looked up at Leo. "How flexible are your delivery schedules?" "Completely flexible. We adapt to whatever people need." "Good. That gives us options." Scarlett's fingers flew over her tablet screen. "What if we distributed the operation? Instead of centralizing everything here, we create multiple smaller processing centers throughout the delivery area." Leo frowned. "I'm not following." "Look." Scarlett gestured toward her tablet screen, which now displayed a rough map of the region. You have established relationships with businesses and community centers in every town you serve, right? What if each location handles storage and processing for their immediate area? We coordinate the network centrally, but execution happens locally. Martha looked up from her plastic wrapping duties. Like the old barn quilting bees, where everyone brings their squares to work on at home, then brings them together for assembly? Exactly like that. Distributed manufacturing with centralized coordination. Scarlett was warming to the concept. Leo, how many locations could realistically serve as temporary processing centers? Leo was staring at her tablet with growing excitement. The diner in Evergreen Falls has a big back room. The community center in Pine Ridge. The church basement in Maple Falls. Maybe the ranger station for the really remote deliveries. Perfect. Now we need to figure out logistics. How do packages get sorted to the right locations? How do we coordinate delivery schedules? How do we maintain your quality standards across multiple sites? For the next 3 hours, Scarlett found herself completely absorbed in solving the most complex logistics challenge of her career. But unlike her usual corporate consultations, this felt personal. Every decision affected people she'd met, communities she was beginning to understand, families who were counting on their Christmas deliveries. Leo proved to be an invaluable collaborator, his deep knowledge of the community complementing her systematic approach to problem-solving. When she suggested using digital coordination tools, he knew which locations had reliable internet and which would need phone-based communication. When she mapped efficient delivery routes, he added information about road conditions, customer preferences, and local logistics that no algorithm could have captured. This is remarkable, Scarlett said as they finalized the coordination spreadsheet that would manage the distributed operation. You've essentially designed a resilient network system that can adapt to disruptions while maintaining service quality. We've designed it, Leo corrected. I never would have thought of the distributed processing approach, and I definitely wouldn't have known how to coordinate it systematically. And I wouldn't have known that Mrs. Henderson needs her packages delivered before 2 p.m., because that's when she goes to check on her neighbor. Or that the Pine Ridge Community Center can't take deliveries on Wednesdays, because that's when they run the senior lunch program. Scarlett looked up from her tablet. We make a good team. The words hung in the air for a moment, carrying more weight than either of them had intended. Scarlett felt heat rise in her cheeks as she realized how closely they'd been working together, how natural their collaboration had become. We should test the system, she said quickly, focusing back on her tablet. Small scale first, then expand if it works. Agreed. What do you think about starting with Pine Ridge tomorrow? That's our biggest volume after Evergreen Falls. Makes sense? And it gives us a chance to refine the process before we implement across all locations. By the time they'd finished planning, it was nearly midnight. Most of the volunteers had gone home, leaving Scarlett and Leo alone in the barn, with the steady drip of rainwater and the warm glow of the work lights Tom had strung to illuminate the dry areas. I can't believe we just redesigned our entire operation in one evening, Leo said, settling onto a wooden crate next to where Scarlett was making final notes on her tablet. It's not redesigned, it's adapted. The core principles are exactly the same. Personal service, community connection, flexible response to individual needs. We've just distributed the execution to make it more resilient. Is that what you do in your regular consulting? Help businesses adapt without losing their essential character? Scarlett considered the question. I try to, though I have to admit most of my clients are more interested in cost reduction than preservation of values. That must be frustrating, sometimes. Scarlett saved her notes and closed the tablet. But this has been different. Usually I'm trying to convince business owners to change things they're attached to. With you, I'm trying to help you keep what makes you special while adapting to survive. Leo was quiet for a moment, studying her face in the warm light. Can I tell you something? Of course. When I first heard that Meridian was sending an efficiency expert, I was terrified. I thought you'd take one look at our operation and recommend shutting it down immediately. And now I think you might be the person who saves it. Leo's voice was soft, almost wondering. The distributed network idea, the way you've managed to systematize our approach without losing the personal touch. I never imagined it was possible. Scarlett felt that flutter in her chest again, stronger this time. Leo, I know this is probably completely inappropriate given our professional relationship, but I have to ask, is this just business for you? Or is it becoming something more? The question hung between them like a bridge Scarlett could choose to cross or retreat from. Every professional instinct told her to maintain boundaries, to keep the focus on business objectives and deliverable outcomes. But as she looked at Leo, really looked at him, taking in the genuine concern in his brown eyes, the way he'd worked tirelessly not just to save his business, but to make sure his community's needs were met, the passion and integrity that drove everything he did, Scarlett realized her professional instincts were at war with something much deeper. It started as business, she said quietly. But you're right, it's becoming something more. Leo's smile was soft and relieved. I was hoping you'd say that. Leo, I need you to understand something. My contract with Meridian ends in 6 days. After that, I go back to Chicago and you stay here. And whatever this is becomes very complicated. What if it doesn't have to be complicated? How could it not be? My life is in Chicago. My career, my apartment, my whole professional network. And your life is here, deeply rooted in this community. There's no obvious way to reconcile those things. Leo reached for her hand, his fingers warm and calloused against her palm. Maybe we don't have to figure it all out tonight. Maybe we just have to be willing to consider possibilities. Scarlett looked down at their joined hands, thinking about all the impossibilities she'd witnessed over the past week. A delivery service that ran on Christmas magic and community goodwill. A business model that prioritized people over profit and somehow made both work. A man who'd built his entire life around caring for others and had somehow made her want to be part of that caring. I'm not very good at possibilities, she admitted. I'm much better at plans and systems and predictable outcomes. Then maybe it's time to try something different. Before Scarlett could second-guess herself, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft and sweet, and tasted like the hot chocolate Martha had been pressing on everyone throughout the evening. When they separated, Leo's eyes were bright with surprise, and something that looked like joy. That was definitely outside my usual operational parameters, Scarlett said, feeling suddenly shy. Best deviation from protocol I've ever seen, Leo replied, his hand still holding hers. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the rain drip and the distant sound of the town settling into sleep. Finally, Scarlett stirred. I should get back to the inn. We've got a big day tomorrow if we're going to test the distributed processing system. Right. Business. But Leo's smile suggested he was thinking about more than business. As he walked her to her car, Scarlett found herself acutely aware of everything. The crisp mountain air, the way the Christmas lights in town reflected off the snow, the warmth of Leo's presence beside her. Scarlett, Leo said as she reached for her car door. Yes? Thank you. For today, for the solution, for caring about what we're trying to do here. Whatever happens with the rest of it, I want you to know that you've made a real difference. We're not done yet, Scarlett replied. Tomorrow, we find out if brilliant ideas actually work in practice. And if they don't, Scarlett surprised herself by grinning. Then we try something else. That's what good teams do, right? They adapt. As she drove back to the inn through the quiet streets of Evergreen Falls, Scarlett realized that somewhere between analyzing Leo's business model and falling for the man himself, she'd stopped thinking about North Pole logistics as a client problem to be solved and started thinking about it as a life she might want to be part of. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. The distributed processing system worked better than either Scarlett or Leo had dared to hope. Within 3 days, they had transformed North Pole logistics from a centralized operation into a resilient network that could handle the roof crisis without missing a single delivery. Scarlett found herself spending her days traveling between locations, troubleshooting coordination issues, and marveling at how quickly the various communities had embraced their roles in the expanded operation. The Pine Ridge Community Center had become a model of efficient package processing, with volunteers who'd learned Scarlett's sorting system and added their own local improvements. The church basement in Maple Falls had turned package wrapping into a social event, with families bringing children to help while catching up on community news. "You realize what you've done, don't you?" Leo asked on December 21st as they drove between locations, monitoring the system they'd created. "Solved a temporary logistics problem?" Scarlett looked up from her tablet, where she was tracking delivery completion rates that exceeded anything North Pole Logistics had achieved in its 30-year history. "You've given every community ownership of the delivery process. They're not just customers anymore. They're partners." Leo navigated around a snow-covered curve, waving at a family loading packages into their pickup truck outside the Pine Ridge Center. "Look at that. The Hendersons are taking packages to the remote cabins because they live out that way anyway." Yesterday, the teenagers in Maple Falls organized their own delivery route to cover the youth soccer team's fundraiser gifts. Scarlett watched the Henderson family through the truck window, noting the careful way they handled each package and the obvious pride they took in being part of the operation. "I didn't expect the community investment to be this strong." "That's because you gave them a way to contribute that honors what they already valued about us: personal attention, local knowledge, caring about individual needs." Leo glanced at her with obvious admiration. "You didn't just solve our roof problem, you created something new." "We created something new," Scarlett corrected, though the warmth in her chest at his praise was becoming difficult to ignore. "Fair enough. Partnership credit duly noted." Leo's grin was infectious. "Speaking of partnerships, there's something I want to show you. A kind of thank you for everything you've done." "Leo, you don't need to thank me. This has been..." Scarlett paused, realizing she didn't have professional language for what this experience had become. "This has been the most rewarding project of my career." "Good. Because what I want to show you isn't exactly business-related." An hour later, Scarlett found herself following Leo up a snow-covered trail that led away from any of the communities they served. She'd traded her professional attire for the snow gear that had become her uniform over the past week, and she was beginning to understand why Leo seemed so at home in these mountains. "Where exactly are we going?" she asked, slightly breathless from the climb. "Trust me," Leo said, offering his hand to help her over a fallen log. "It's worth the hike." The trail crested a ridge and opened into a clearing that made Scarlett gasp. Below them spread a panoramic view of all the mountain communities North Pole Logistics served. Evergreen Falls nestled in its valley, Pine Ridge sparkling in the afternoon sun, Maple Falls visible as a cluster of lights in the distance. The entire landscape was draped in fresh snow that caught the light like scattered diamonds. "Leo, this is incredible. Best view in the mountains," he agreed, settling onto a fallen log that had clearly been placed as a natural bench. "I come up here when I need to remember why I do what I do." Scarlett sat beside him, pulling out her phone to capture the view before remembering that no photograph could capture the vastness of what she was seeing. "You can see everything from here. Every community, every delivery route, every family we serve," Leo added quietly. "Sometimes, when the business gets overwhelming or I start questioning whether we're making a real difference, I come up here and look at all those houses and remember that each one represents people who count on us." Scarlett studied his profile as he gazed out over the valley. "Is that why you've never wanted to expand? Because you can literally see the limits of what you can realistically serve?" "Partly. But also because expansion would mean losing the personal connection that makes this work." Leo turned to meet her eyes. "You've shown me how to make our operation more efficient and resilient without sacrificing what makes it special. I didn't think that was possible." "I didn't think it was possible either, but you taught me that efficiency isn't just about numbers and systems. Sometimes it's about creating the right conditions for people to do what they naturally want to do." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the late afternoon light paint the snow-covered peaks in shades of gold and rose. Scarlett felt a peace she'd never experienced during her high-powered consulting career, a sense of rightness that had nothing to do with maximizing profit margins or optimizing operational protocols. "Can I ask you something?" Leo said eventually. "Always. What happens when your contract ends? I mean, Practically speaking, do you have to go back to Chicago immediately? Are there other clients waiting? Scarlett had been dreading this conversation, even as she'd known it was inevitable. My flight is booked for December 26th. I have a consultation starting January 3rd with a manufacturing company in Detroit. And that's non-negotiable? Well, no. I'm an independent contractor. I could reschedule if I had a reason. Scarlett looked at him. Are you asking if I have a reason? Leo was quiet for a long moment, his breath creating small puffs of vapor in the cold air. I'm asking if you think this, he gestured between them, is worth exploring. Leo, Scarlett struggled to find words for the confusion of emotions she'd been trying to manage all week. I care about you. More than I should, given our professional relationship, more than I expected to care about anyone, if I'm being honest. But I don't know how to reconcile caring about you with everything else in my life. My career is based in major metropolitan areas. My expertise is in corporate efficiency consulting. My entire professional network is focused on helping large companies optimize their operations. She gestured toward the view below them. I don't know how to make a living in a place like this doing the kind of work you do. What if you didn't have to choose? What if there was a way to do both? Scarlett looked at him curiously. What do you mean? What if North Pole Logistics became a model for other small, community-based businesses? What if there were other operations like ours that needed the kind of help you've given us, preserving what makes them valuable while adapting to survive? The idea hit Scarlett like a physical sensation, her consultant's mind immediately recognizing the potential. Specialized consulting for community-based businesses, helping them modernize without losing their essential character. You've proven it's possible. And there are small businesses all over rural America that are facing the same pressures we were. Leo's voice grew more excited as he developed the idea. Traditional efficiency consulting doesn't work for them because it eliminates what makes them special. But your approach, understanding the community context, preserving the human elements, building resilience instead of just cutting costs. It could work, Scarlett said slowly, her mind racing through possibilities. The demand is definitely there. Small businesses are struggling to compete with automated services while maintaining their local connections, and you could base yourself anywhere. Travel to clients, work remotely for coordination, but have a home base that actually feels like home. Scarlett looked out over the mountain communities, imagining herself as part of this landscape, instead of just visiting it. You're suggesting I completely restructure my career around a business model that doesn't even exist yet. I'm suggesting you create something new, the same way you helped us create something new. That's a huge risk, Leo. What if it doesn't work? What if there isn't enough demand? What if I can't make a living? What if you're happier than you've ever been? What if you make a difference in communities that really need your help? What if you build something meaningful instead of just profitable? Leo reached for her hand, his fingers warm even through their gloves. I'm not asking you to give up your career, Scarlett. I'm asking if you'd be willing to reimagine it, here, with me. The words hung in the crisp air, a offer and a question and a hope all wrapped together. Scarlett felt tears prick her eyes as she realized that Leo wasn't just offering her a new business model, he was offering her a new life. I'm scared, she admitted. I've never made a major decision based on feelings instead of data. Then maybe it's time to try. Leo squeezed her hand. What do your feelings tell you? Scarlett looked out over the communities they'd spent the week serving together, thinking about Emma's grateful smile, the children's excitement at seeing the delivery truck, the way Martha had hugged her when the distributed system had worked perfectly on its first day. She thought about the past week, the most challenging, frustrating, rewarding, and unexpectedly joyful of her professional life. She thought about Leo's passion for his community, his integrity in balancing business needs with human values, the way he'd trusted her to help him preserve what mattered most. And she thought about the way her heart had started racing every time he smiled at her, the way his laugh had become her favorite sound, the way she'd started looking forward to tomorrow, not because of business objectives, but because it meant more time working alongside him. My feelings tell me, she said carefully, that I've never wanted anything as much as I want to say yes to this. Then say yes. It's not that simple. There are practical considerations. Leo silenced her with a kiss that was deeper and more certain than their first one, a kiss that tasted like possibility and felt like coming home. When they separated, his eyes were bright with hope and something that looked remarkably like love. Sometimes, he said softly, the practical considerations work themselves out when you're brave enough to choose what makes you happy. As they sat on the mountain, watching the lights begin to twinkle in the communities below, Scarlett realized that Leo might be right. All her careful planning and systematic analysis had brought her success, but they'd never brought her the kind of bone-deep satisfaction she'd found in helping North Pole Logistics adapt and thrive. If I did this, she said quietly, if I really restructured my entire career around community-based consulting, where would I live? Leo's smile was brilliant. I know a great little mountain town with excellent coffee and the best Christmas lights in 3 states. Very welcoming to newcomers, especially ones who've proven they can handle winter delivery routes. And what about us? I mean, personally, what about us? I don't know how to do this, Leo. I don't know how to balance a romantic relationship with a professional partnership. I don't know how to make decisions based on feelings instead of spreadsheets. Then we figure it out together, the same way we figured out the distributed processing system. We try things, we adapt when they don't work, and we keep what does work. Leo stood up and offered her his hand. Come on, let's get back to town. Martha's making her famous Christmas Eve cookies tonight, and the whole community is gathering to package the final deliveries for tomorrow. As they walked back down the mountain trail, Scarlett found herself thinking about the irony of her situation. She'd come to Evergreen Falls to audit a failing business and recommend efficiency improvements. Instead, she'd fallen in love with both the business and the man who ran it, and she was seriously considering restructuring her entire life around the possibility of building something new together. Leo? She said as they reached his truck. Yeah? Ask me again tomorrow, after Christmas Eve deliveries are done and the crisis is resolved, and we know for certain that the system we've built actually works. Ask you what? Ask me to stay. Leo's grin could have powered all the Christmas lights in Evergreen Falls. I can do that. As they drove back toward town, Scarlett realized that for the first time in her adult life, she was more excited about the possibilities than anxious about the unknowns. And that, she thought, might be the most important efficiency improvement of all. The attack came on December 22nd, 2 days before Christmas Eve, when North Pole Logistics was at its most vulnerable. Scarlett was at the Pine Ridge Community Center, helping coordinate the final pre-Christmas deliveries, when her phone rang with an unknown number. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and utterly cold. Miss Monroe? This is David Chen, Senior Vice President of Strategic Development for Apex Logistics Solutions. I believe we need to talk. Scarlett stepped outside into the parking lot, away from the cheerful chaos of volunteers wrapping packages. I'm sorry. I don't think I know your company. We're the interested party that hired Meridian Corporate Solutions to assess North Pole Logistics. I understand you've been conducting quite an unconventional audit. The bottom dropped out of Scarlett's stomach. Excuse me? Miss Monroe, we have GPS tracking on your rental vehicle. We know you've been operating a distributed delivery network across multiple locations. We know you've been coordinating with local businesses and community centers. Most importantly, we know you've been romantically involved with the subject of your supposed objective assessment. Scarlett felt heat flood her face, followed immediately by a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Mr. Chen, I can assure you that my assessment of North Pole Logistics has been thoroughly professional. Has it? Because from our perspective, it looks like you've gone completely native. Instead of documenting the operational failures that would justify our acquisition offer, you've actually helped them expand their reach and improve their efficiency. Acquisition offer? Scarlett's voice was barely above a whisper. Did you really think Meridian sent you here out of altruistic concern for a struggling small business? We've been trying to buy out North Pole Logistics for 6 months. They service territory we need for our automated delivery expansion into rural markets. Your job was to document their failures so we could justify a lowball offer, or, preferably, let them fail entirely so we could acquire their roots at bankruptcy prices. The parking lot seemed to tilt around Scarlett. That's not. I was never told. Of course you weren't told. You're supposed to be objective, though clearly that ship has sailed. Chen's voice carried a note of satisfaction that made Scarlett's skin crawl. Fortunately, we don't need your cooperation anymore. Thanks to your distributed network idea, we now have documentation of every business and community center that North Pole Logistics works with. Perfect intelligence for our own expansion strategy. You can't just take over their operation. We can, and we will. Apex Logistics specializes in replacing inefficient small businesses with automated delivery solutions. We'll offer standardized service at lower costs, eliminate the need for local volunteers, and provide professional logistics management. Chen paused. We'll be making offers to their partner locations starting tomorrow. Most small businesses can't resist the financial incentives we provide. Scarlett's mind raced, thinking about the community centers and churches and local businesses that had embraced their role in the distributed network. You're talking about destroying the entire community infrastructure that makes this work. We're talking about bringing professional efficiency to an underserved market, which I believe is supposed to be your area of expertise. This is different. These communities depend on the personal connections, the local knowledge. Miss Monroe, let me be clear. Your contract with Meridian Corporate Solutions expires tomorrow. Your final report is due at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. You can either submit documentation that supports our acquisition strategy, or you can explain to your professional references why you sabotaged a major client engagement for personal reasons. The threat was unmistakable. Scarlett closed her eyes, seeing her career, her reputation, her entire professional future hanging in the balance. What exactly are you asking me to do? Document the operational inefficiencies that make North Pole Logistics unsuitable for long-term viability. Recommend that their distributed model is unsustainable without professional oversight. Suggest that acquisition by a larger logistics company would benefit the communities they serve. And if I refuse, then you'll find it very difficult to get consulting contracts in the future. Meridian has significant influence in the industry, Miss Monroe. We can make sure that your choice to prioritize personal relationships over professional obligations becomes well known among potential clients. Scarlett stared across the parking lot at the community center, where she could see volunteers through the windows, laughing as they worked together to prepare Christmas deliveries. She thought about Emma's grateful smile, about the children who pressed their faces against school windows to wave at the delivery truck, about the families who depended on North Pole Logistics not just for packages, but for connection to their wider community. I need time to think about this, she said finally. You have until 5 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Submit the report we need, or face the consequences. Chen's voice softened slightly, taking on the tone of someone offering reasonable advice. Miss Monroe, you're a talented consultant. Don't let sentiment destroy a promising career. The line went dead, leaving Scarlett standing in the snow with her phone clutched in her shaking hand. Scarlett? Leo's voice came from behind her, warm with concern. Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. She turned to face him, and the worry in his brown eyes nearly broke her heart. How could she explain that she'd been unknowingly working for the company that wanted to destroy everything he'd built? How could she tell him that her presence here had actually made his situation worse by providing intelligence to his competitors? There's something I need to tell you about my contract with Meridian. Leo's expression grew more serious. What about it? Let's go somewhere private. This isn't a conversation for a parking lot. An hour later, they sat in Leo's kitchen while Scarlett explained everything. Apex Logistics acquisition plans, the real purpose of her consultation, the threat to her career if she didn't cooperate. Leo listened without interruption, his face growing more distant with each revelation. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands folded on the table. So the whole time, he said finally, you were gathering information that would help them destroy us. I didn't know. Leo, I swear I had no idea. But you do now. His voice was carefully controlled. And now you have to choose between your career and whatever this is between us. It's not that simple. If I refuse to write the report they want, they'll make sure I can't work in consulting again. But if I write it, I'll be providing them with everything they need to take over your operation. What does the report say? The one you've been working on all week? Scarlett pulled her laptop from her bag with trembling hands and opened the document she'd been preparing. It says that North Pole Logistics has successfully adapted to modern challenges while preserving its essential community value. It documents the distributed network as an innovative solution that increases resilience and efficiency. It recommends strategies for sustainable growth that maintain local character. Leo read over her shoulder, his presence warm despite the chill that had settled between them. This would actually help us, wouldn't it? If it went to the right people. Yes, but it's not going to the right people. It's going to Apex Logistics, who will use it to perfect their takeover strategy. So what are you going to do? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with everything they hadn't said about the future they'd been planning together. Scarlett looked at Leo's face, seeing the careful distance he was maintaining, the way he was already protecting himself from the possibility that she might choose her career over their community. I don't know, she whispered. Leo, if I don't submit some kind of report, they'll destroy my reputation. I'll never work in consulting again. And if you do submit it, they'll destroy everything I've worked to build. Maybe there's a third option. Maybe I can write a report that satisfies them without giving them what they actually need. Leo shook his head. They're not stupid, Scarlett. If they're as sophisticated as you say, they'll see through any attempt to mislead them. Then what do you suggest? I suggest you do what you think is right, not what's best for your career, not what's safest for your future, but what you believe is the right thing to do. Leo stood up from the table, suddenly looking exhausted. I need some air. And you need to figure out what kind of person you want to be. Leo, wait. But he was already walking toward the door, leaving Scarlett alone with her laptop and the impossible choice that would determine not just her future, but the future of everyone she'd come to care about in Evergreen Falls. She spent the rest of the evening walking through the town, trying to think her way through the dilemma. Every solution she considered had devastating consequences. Submit the honest report, and Apex would use it to perfect their takeover. Submit a misleading report, and they'd eventually figure out the deception and destroy her career anyway. Refuse to submit any report, and they'd blacklist her from the industry while proceeding with their acquisition based on the intelligence they'd already gathered. As she passed the North Pole Logistics building, she could see light in the windows and hear the sound of voices inside. The volunteers were working late to prepare for Christmas Eve deliveries, their laughter carrying on the cold air. They had no idea that their entire operation was under threat, that the distributed network they'd embraced so enthusiastically was being used against them. At midnight, Scarlett finally returned to her in-room and opened her laptop. The cursor blinked on the empty page where her final report was supposed to materialize. She had 17 hours to decide whether to save her career or save the community that had become more important to her than any professional success. For the first time in her life, Scarlett Monroe had encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with efficiency analysis and systematic thinking. And the man she'd fallen in love with was counting on her to choose correctly. Christmas Eve morning dawned crisp and clear, with fresh snow that made Evergreen Falls look like something from a holiday card. Scarlett had barely slept, spending most of the night staring at her laptop screen and the report that could determine the future of North Pole Logistics. At 6 a.m., she gave up on sleep and walked to the warehouse, hoping to find Leo and somehow repair the damage that yesterday's revelation had caused between them. Instead, she found chaos. "Scarlett!" Martha called out from where she was frantically sorting packages. "Thank goodness you're here. We've got a crisis." "What kind of crisis?" Tom looked up from a pile of delivery manifests, his usually cheerful face creased with worry. 3 of our distributed processing centers called this morning. They've received offers from some big logistics company, generous offers to handle their deliveries with automated systems starting immediately. Scarlett's heart sank. Which locations? Pine Ridge Community Center, the church in Maple Falls, and the ranger station. They're all considering accepting. The financial incentives are significant. Where's Leo? Out talking to the community center board in Pine Ridge, trying to convince them not to sign. Martha's voice was tight with worry. But honestly, honey, I'm not sure what argument he can make. These people need the money, and this Apex company is offering guaranteed income with no volunteer labor required. Scarlett pulled out her phone and checked the time. 8 hours until her report was due. 8 hours to find a solution that could save North Pole logistics and the communities that depended on it. Martha, I need you to call everyone. All the volunteers, all the community leaders, everyone who's been part of the distributed network. Tell them we're having an emergency meeting at noon. What kind of meeting? The kind where we figure out how to fight back. For the next 4 hours, Scarlett worked with an intensity that surprised even her efficiency-oriented mind. She made phone calls, sent emails, and coordinated what could only be described as a small-scale intelligence operation. If Apex Logistics wanted to play hardball, she was going to show them what a real consultant could accomplish when she stopped being objective and started being invested. By the time Leo returned from Pine Ridge, unsuccessful in his attempt to convince the community center to reject Apex offer, Scarlett had assembled the kind of comprehensive competitive analysis that had made her reputation in corporate consulting. What's all this? Leo asked, looking at the laptop screens, printed documents, and wall charts that had transformed the North Pole Logistics Office into something resembling a war room. Intelligence, Scarlett said, not looking up from her laptop. Financial records, service contracts, customer satisfaction surveys, operational data. Everything we need to prove that Apex Logistics is not the solution these communities are looking for. How did you get all this information? Professional networks, public records, former clients who've dealt with Apex before. Scarlett's fingers flew over the keyboard. Did you know that Apex has a 43% customer dissatisfaction rate in rural markets? That their automated systems have a 12% package loss rate? That they've been subject to 3 federal investigations for predatory acquisition practices? Leo sat down beside her, studying the data she'd compiled. This is incredible. But how does it help us? The community centers are being offered guaranteed money. Even if Apex's service is inferior, that might not matter if people need the income. That's where the noon meeting comes in. Scarlett saved her document and turned to face him. I have a proposal. Actually, I have several proposals. But they depend on the community being willing to think bigger than just package delivery. What do you mean? Before Scarlett could answer, people began arriving for the meeting. By 12:30, the North Pole Logistics warehouse was packed with representatives from every community they served. Business owners, church leaders, school principals, community center directors, and dozens of volunteers who'd become part of the distributed network. Scarlett stood before the group, her laptop connected to a borrowed projector, her professional presentation skills deployed in service of something that mattered more than any corporate contract. Thank you all for coming, she began. I know many of you have received offers from Apex Logistics. I'm here to show you why accepting those offers would be the worst mistake your communities could make. For the next 30 minutes, Scarlett presented the most important analysis of her career. She showed them Apex's track record of service failures, their pattern of eliminating local jobs once automated systems were in place, their history of abandoning rural markets when they proved less profitable than projected. But more importantly, she showed them what they'd built together. The distributed processing network you've created isn't just about package delivery, she explained, clicking through charts that documented community impact, economic benefits, and social connections. You've created a resilient local economy that keeps money and jobs in your communities. You've built infrastructure that can adapt to any crisis. Ice storms, road closures, supply chain disruptions. You've proven that small communities can compete with corporate automation by leveraging what corporations can't replicate: personal relationships and local knowledge. She paused, looking out at the faces of people who'd become more than clients or subjects of analysis. They'd become neighbors, friends, family. Apex Logistics wants to replace all of that with automated trucks and scanning systems. They want to eliminate your jobs, your volunteer opportunities, your community connections. They want to turn package delivery into a transaction instead of a relationship. But what about the money? Called out Bill Henderson from Pine Ridge. Our community center needs that income. I'm glad you asked, Scarlett said, clicking to her final slide. Because I have a proposal that addresses both the financial needs and the community values. The slide showed a business model that took Scarlett's breath away even as she presented it. What if, instead of selling out to Apex, your communities became equity partners in an expanded North Pole logistics? What if we formalized the distributed network as a cooperative business that shares both ownership and profits among all participating locations? The room erupted in surprised murmurs as people processed what she was suggesting. Here's how it would work, Scarlett continued. Each participating location becomes a franchise partner, owning a share of the overall operation proportional to their investment and service area. Leo remains as coordinator and operations manager, but major decisions are made collectively. Profits are shared based on contribution and need. Most importantly, community character and personal service remain at the center of everything we do. Leo was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Scarlett, this is revolutionary. But how do we compete financially with what Apex is offering? Because we're not just competing with their immediate offers. We're building something sustainable. Scarlett pulled up a detailed financial projection. Initial buy-in costs are covered by small business loans and community investment. But within 2 years, each location will be earning more from their share of cooperative profits than Apex was offering in guaranteed income. Plus, they maintain control over their local operations and preserve community employment. Martha stood up from the back of the room. Honey, this sounds wonderful, but it's also complicated. How do we know it will work? Because, Scarlett said, her voice growing stronger with conviction, you've already proven it works. The distributed network you've built over the past week is the foundation. We're just formalizing it and adding profit sharing to make it sustainable. For the next hour, the room buzzed with questions, concerns, and growing excitement as community leaders began to understand the potential of what Scarlett was proposing. It wasn't just about saving North Pole logistics. It was about creating a new model for rural economic development that preserved community values while providing financial stability. I need to ask something, Leo said as the formal meeting wound down and people broke into smaller discussion groups. This cooperative model, this partnership structure, it's brilliant, but it also completely changes what North Pole logistics is. Are you sure this is what you want? Scarlett looked around the room at the animated conversations, the excited planning, the hope that had replaced worry on faces throughout the crowd. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Even though it means confronting Apex directly, even though it means your career in traditional consulting is probably over, especially because of that. Scarlett met his eyes. Leo, yesterday I thought I had to choose between my career and what we've built here, but I realized I was asking the wrong question. What's the right question? The right question is, what kind of life do I want to build? What kind of work do I want to do? What kind of person do I want to be? Scarlett took his hands, not caring that half the community was watching. And the answer is that I want to build something meaningful with someone I love, in a place that feels like home. Leo's smile was radiant. Does this mean what I think it means? It means I'm staying. It means we're building this cooperative together. And it means that at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, I'm submitting a report to Meridian Corporate Solutions that recommends North Pole Logistics, the foundation for a revolutionary new approach to community-based logistics. What about Apex? What about the threats to your career? Scarlett's grin was fierce with determination. Let them try to blacklist me. By the time I'm done documenting this cooperative model and its potential for replication, every small business consultant in the country is going to want to know how we did it. As if summoned by their conversation, Scarlett's phone rang with David Chen's number. Miss Monroe, I trust you're putting the finishing touches on your report? Actually, Mr. Chen, I'm calling to inform you that North Pole Logistics is no longer interested in acquisition offers from Apex Logistics. In fact, we'll be competing directly with your automated services using a model that your systems can't replicate. There was a long pause. I see. And I suppose you think this protects you from the professional consequences of your breach of contract? I think Meridian Corporate Solutions is about to receive a case study in successful small business transformation that will revolutionize how consulting firms approach community-based clients, Scarlett replied calmly. But you're welcome to try explaining to your board of directors why you turned down the opportunity to be part of something groundbreaking. She hung up before Chen could respond, then turned to find Leo watching her with obvious admiration. That was either very brave or very foolish, she said. Probably both. But it felt right. As the afternoon wore on and the cooperative partnership agreements began to take shape, Scarlett realized that she'd found something she did never thought to look for, a way to use her skills and training in service of values she actually believed in. At exactly 4:59 p.m. Eastern Time, she submitted her report to Meridian Corporate Solutions. It was 47 pages of detailed analysis, financial projections, and implementation strategies for community-based logistics cooperatives. It was the most thorough, innovative, and professionally excellent work of her career, and it recommended North Pole Logistics as a model for sustainable small business success rather than a candidate for corporate acquisition. By Christmas Eve evening, the cooperative agreements were signed, the community partnerships were formalized, and North Pole Logistics had been transformed from a struggling family business into the anchor of a resilient economic network. As Scarlett and Leo stood in the warehouse, watching volunteers load the final Christmas Eve deliveries, she realized that she'd accomplished something she never achieved in her corporate consulting career. She'd created a solution that made everyone, clients, communities, and herself, genuinely happy. So, Leo said, slipping his arm around her waist, ready for your first Christmas Eve delivery route as an official partner in North Pole Logistics Cooperative? Actually, Scarlett said, leaning into his warmth, I was hoping we could take the sleigh. Leo's laugh was rich with joy. I think that can be arranged. After all, some deliveries require a little Christmas magic. As they walked out into the snow-covered evening, heading toward Dasher and Blitzen and a sleigh full of Christmas dreams, Scarlett realized that she'd finally found the perfect balance between efficiency and heart. And it felt exactly like coming home. December 24th, 1 year later, found Scarlett Monroe Andersen. She'd kept her professional name, but added Leo, S for the cooperative business, standing in the expanded headquarters of North Pole Logistics Cooperative, marveling at how much had changed. The original warehouse had been joined by 2 additional buildings, one housing the training center where other small communities came to learn about implementing cooperative business models, and another serving as offices for Mountain Communities Consulting, the firm Scarlett had founded to help rural businesses adapt and thrive without losing their essential character. Hard to believe it's only been a year, Leo said, joining her at the window that overlooked the bustling operation. The yard was filled with vehicles, the original sleigh, 3 delivery trucks, 2 electric vehicles for local routes, and a new hybrid van designed specifically for mountain terrain. Hard to believe we pulled it off, Scarlett replied, watching teams of employees and volunteers coordinate the largest Christmas Eve delivery operation in North Pole Logistics history. The cooperative now served 15 mountain communities, employed 32 people year-round, and had a waiting list of communities wanting to join the network. Any regrets? Leo asked, slipping his arms around her from behind. Scarlett leaned back against his chest, thinking about the question. Her old colleagues at Meridian Corporate Solutions had initially been skeptical of her decision to specialize in community-based consulting, but that skepticism had turned to professional envy as Mountain Communities Consulting gained national recognition. She'd been featured in Harvard Business Review, consulted with the Small Business Administration, and was booked solid with client engagements through the following Christmas. More importantly, she woke up every morning excited about her work instead of just professionally satisfied with it. No regrets, she said firmly. Though I do sometimes miss the simplicity of regular corporate consulting, these community partnerships are much more complex than optimizing warehouse operations. Speaking of complex, Leo said, his voice taking on a nervous quality that made Scarlett turn around to look at him. I have something for you. An early Christmas present. Leo, we agreed no expensive gifts until the business loan is paid off. It's not expensive. Well, it wasn't expensive for me, but it might be expensive for you, depending on how you look at it. Scarlett studied his face, noting the combination of excitement and anxiety in his expression. What are you talking about? Instead of answering, Leo reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small wooden box that was clearly handmade. The craftsmanship was beautiful, with intricate carvings of pine trees and mountain peaks around the edges. Leo, Scarlett's voice trailed off as she realized what she was looking at. Tom made the box. Martha helped me pick out the ring. Emma gave me her grandmother's blessing. Apparently, she's been planning our wedding since the day she met you. Leo's words tumbled over each other in his nervousness, and the whole cooperative board voted unanimously that the best Christmas present they could give themselves would be making sure you're permanently part of this community. Scarlett's hands flew to her mouth as Leo dropped to one knee in front of the window, surrounded by the cheerful chaos of Christmas Eve preparations. Scarlett Monroe, will you marry me? Will you build a life here, with me, helping communities preserve what makes them special while adapting to whatever the future brings? The ring was perfect, a simple solitaire that caught the light from the Christmas decorations strung throughout the warehouse. But what made Scarlett's heart race wasn't the ring or the proposal itself. It was the realization that Leo was offering her exactly what she'd discovered she wanted most. A partnership that honored both her professional skills and her personal values, in a place that had become home. Yes, she said, laughing through tears she hadn't realized were falling. Yes, of course. Yes. The cheer that erupted from the warehouse floor suggested that their supposedly private moment had been observed by most of the Christmas Eve crew. As Leo slipped the ring onto her finger, Scarlett could hear Martha calling out instructions for an impromptu engagement party. You realize what you've done, don't you? Scarlett asked as Leo stood up and kissed her thoroughly. You've just committed to a lifetime of efficiency improvements. Best operational optimization I've ever made, Leo replied, his grin bright enough to power all the Christmas lights in the valley. 2 hours later, Scarlett found herself back in the sleigh beside Leo, but this time wearing an engagement ring and carrying Christmas presents for the families they'd served throughout the year. The cooperative had voted to make personal gift-giving part of their Christmas Eve tradition, small tokens of appreciation for the communities that had embraced their expanded model. You know what the best part of this is? Scarlett said as they glided through the snow-covered forest toward their first delivery stop. What's that? A year ago, I came here to fix what I thought was a failing business. Instead, I discovered that the business was fine. It was my understanding of success that needed fixing. Leo guided the sleigh around a bend in the trail, and the lights of Pine Ridge came into view below them. And now I measure success by how many communities are thriving, how many families feel connected and supported, how many people have work that honors their values. Scarlett squeezed his hand. Turns out that's a much better metric than quarterly profit margins. Their first stop was Emma's cabin, where the 84-year-old woman welcomed them with hot chocolate and tears of joy over their engagement news. Their second stop was the Pine Ridge Community Center, where the director presented them with a photo album documenting all the ways the cooperative had strengthened the local economy over the past year. As they continued their route, visiting families and businesses throughout the mountain communities, Scarlett realized that she and Leo weren't just delivering Christmas presents. They were participating in the ongoing celebration of a network of relationships that had become more valuable than any traditional business model. One more stop, Leo said as they headed back toward Evergreen Falls in the early hours of Christmas morning. A special one. Instead of turning toward town, he guided the sleigh up the familiar trail that led to the mountain overlook, where he'd first suggested she might restructure her entire career around community-based consulting. The view was even more beautiful by moonlight, with the snow-covered valleys spread out below them and the lights of all the communities they served twinkling like stars. "This is where it all started," Leo said, settling beside her on the same fallen log where they'd sat a year ago. "This is where you decided to take a chance on something new." "This is where I decided to take a chance on you," Scarlett corrected. "The business model was just details. Important details, though. Without your systematic approach to making it work, we'd still be a struggling small business instead of a thriving cooperative." Scarlett looked out over the communities they served, thinking about all the changes the past year had brought. The distributed processing network had evolved into a sophisticated logistics operation. The community partnerships had expanded into a model that was being replicated by rural businesses across the country. Mountain Communities Consulting had grown from an idea into a recognized leader in sustainable small business development. But the most important change had been personal. She'd learned to balance her analytical skills with emotional intelligence, her drive for efficiency with appreciation for human values, her professional ambitions with the deeper satisfaction of meaningful work. "You know what I love most about this?" she said, leaning against Leo's shoulder. "What?" "We solved the impossible problem. We figured out how to preserve what made North Pole logistics special while adapting it to thrive in the modern world. We proved that efficiency and heart don't have to be mutually exclusive. We make a good team," Leo agreed, his arm tightening around her. "The best team," Scarlett confirmed, ready to tackle whatever challenges next year brings. As they sat on the mountain, watching the first light of Christmas dawn paint the snow-covered peaks in shades of rose and gold, Scarlett realized that she'd found something she'd never known she was looking for. A life that honored both her professional skills and her personal values, in a place where she could make a difference that mattered. "Merry Christmas, Leo Andersen," she said, turning to kiss her fiancé as the sun rose over the communities they'd helped strengthen. "Merry Christmas, Scarlett Monroe Andersen," he replied. "Here's to many more years of delivering Christmas magic together." As they drove the sleigh back toward Evergreen Falls and the Christmas morning celebration that awaited them, Scarlett couldn't help but smile at the perfect efficiency of it all. She'd come to audit a small business and ended up redesigning her entire life around what truly mattered, and it had been the most successful optimization project of her career. And so our story comes to its gentle close, dear listener. In the quiet mountains of Evergreen Falls, where the snow falls softly and Christmas lights twinkle like stars, Scarlett and Leo found what they didn't even know they were searching for. They discovered that the most important things in life cannot be measured in spreadsheets or calculated by algorithms. They can only be felt in the warmth of community, the joy of meaningful work, and the gentle peace that comes from being exactly where you belong. As you drift off to sleep tonight, may you carry with you the magic of this snowy mountain town, where love grows as naturally as pine trees, where every problem has a solution when hearts work together, and where Christmas miracles happen not through magic, but through the simple, profound act of caring for one another. Sweet dreams, and may your own Christmas be filled with the kind of love that makes everything else fall perfectly into place. Sleep well.